everyone, welcome to GEC and TCEQ's CMDP onboarding for lead and copper, water quality parameters, and all other non-microbial compliance monitoring. We will be recording this webinar for your future reference, so if you missed something, you can come back to it later. Some of this in the beginning may be repetitive for you if you attended the microbial onboarding, so thanks for your patience and stay tuned for the new material in the demo portion. Also, for your reference, a copy of this PowerPoint presentation is in the handout section of the GoToWebinar panel, so you can download that from there. For everyone else who hasn't met us, presenting today will be myself, Casey Davidson, and Victoria Zeller. I am a subject matter expert with GEC. I have been with GEC for over a year now, and before that, I was CIDWIS coordinator and inventory manager for the state of Indiana. I was also previously a compliance officer with EPA Region 5. And now, Victoria, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Great, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Victoria Zeller, and I am an environmental specialist with GEC. I have been with GEC for almost 1 year now, and before working with GEC, I spent 5 years at an environmental testing laboratory, working with drinking water compliance for New Mexico and Region 6 sampling and reporting, which is where I began using CMDP. We will have another member of GEC helping us monitor the chat for questions today, so please feel free to enter in any questions if they arise outside of where we will break. We also have a member of TCEQ with us, and thank you all for coming.
Thanks, Victoria. So like Victoria said, throughout our presentation, feel free to ask any questions in the side panel. You could also raise your hand or unmute yourself to ask those questions at any time, and we'll just address those as they come up. We will plan to probably take a quick 5-minute break around halfway through the training, so I'll let you know when we get to that point. But here is our agenda for the day. First, Victoria will walk through EPA's Shared Chrome Air Services website. SCS is the identity management system for CMDP and other EPA web applications. So this is how you will learn how to create your account and register for CMDP. Next, we'll give an overview of CMDP itself. Victoria will walk through reporting non-microbial samples through the CMDP web form, and then I will walk you through reporting those non-micro samples through the Excel template. So while the web form and Excel submission types may not seem very efficient as we're going through them, they're just important to learn so that we understand the principles of CMDP, how it works, and what exactly you are reporting to TCEQ. There is a way to report directly from your LIMS to CMDP, so we will talk about that, but it's not the main demo because that generally involves a lot of individual work, so we'll talk about that more later. Continuing on, we will upload XML files into CMDP for submission, discuss data validations, and how to certify and submit jobs to the state. Finally, we'll give a brief overview of some resources, including EPA's CMDP Help Center, TCEQ's CMDP webpage, and we'll also discuss the path to production. So now I will go ahead and hand it over to Victoria to show us EPA's SCS website.
Thank you so much. I will go ahead and grab that screen. Okay, thank you so much. So here is the SCS homepage, and I am going to start by logging in as if I am an administrator that can send registrations. And here's our dashboard. I always like to check the top notification bar to ensure we are in the correct version of SCS. So it looks like we are. We're in the test environment. And for our purposes, that's exactly where we want to be, so we can continue on. Below we have different grid views. We have Program Services Grid, Notifications, Admin Tools, Role Sponsorship, and the Alerts Grid. All right, so in Program Services, we have a breakdown of all the organizations a user is affiliated with. Using the services link, you can add program services to begin registration with another organization or expand your involvement with a different role or program. Next, in Profile, this can show your user info, your security questions, and your primary organization. The primary organization will be the organization which CMDP defaults to when you go to sign in. And this is noted by a key symbol, like right here. The Mail tab shows communications from SES regarding registration and security questions. And Submission History tab is a search page where you can find signatures affiliated with the CMDP submissions for the chosen organization. Here in the body of the Program Services grid, a user can see all of their affiliated partners, program services, roles, and organizations. I will mention here that there will be a link to the SOP for roles at the end of the presentation, as Casey was mentioning earlier. Keeping in mind that labs should have at least 2 administrators in case one cannot access CMDP for any reason. Unless you're a state lab, you are considered a private lab for CMDP purposes. And you do want to be registering with the new longer lab ID that begins with a T. Those are just a few points. And this action column right here has a handoff link for each organization. This will lead you to CMDP directly, but sometimes it can be glitchy, so I prefer to use my own CMDP link that I just keep bookmarked up here in my toolbar. Okay, moving on from the Program Services grid, we go to Admin Tools. Here in Alert Publishing, this link allows an administrator to publish new alerts and to search for previously published alerts. Next, in Create a User Account, this link will allow for a user to choose a partner, program, and role to register for. So we can select TCEQ, CMDP, and then whatever lab you would want, or whatever role you would want. Okay, and then in pending requests, we have a search page that lets an admin see if there are any existing pending requests for approval. In pre-registration, this link allows for an administrator to create an invite for a new user or for an existing user to add a role. The admin can also search for existing pre-registration invites as a way to avoid duplicate pre-registration requests being sent out. In user management, this page allows the admin to search for existing users in an organization. In this role sponsorship grid, we have access management, where a user can search for other users that have access to CMDP per partner. In pending sponsorship requests, it's a search page which is used to show user accounts waiting to be approved or rejected. And finally, enroll sponsorships and invitations. A user can enter in an email to send a sponsorship account request. And then we also have the notifications grid. So notifications would show here that an administrator created for their organization. And then there's also an alerts grid. So this pops up indicating that a user account is 14 days away from password expiration. When it's present, it's red. It lets you know that it needs to be addressed. I would want to address this as soon as possible because SCS nor CMDP will send you a reminder if you miss this. Okay, so now I'm going to log out of my existing account and show what it would look like for a user with no sponsorship or pre-registration requests. Okay, so here we are back to the main SCS page. Last time I selected login. Now I'm going to select register with SCS. And you are brought right to the choose a partner page. So I will scroll down and find what we want. CMDP. Then you just can choose any role. You could continue here. And then there are just a couple of pages of terms and conditions. Be sure to read through them thoroughly, select the check boxes, and hit accept. I won't go through the entire process as it does involve entering security questions and answers, but you can get an idea of what you'll encounter in the process as laid out in this left-hand menu here. And I will reject that for now. I think that is all I have to share in my overview of SCS and the registration process. Does anybody have any questions at this time?
I don't see any hands raised and I don't see any questions yet.
Okay, super, thank you. So now I'm going to jump into CMDP. All right, so it looks like I'm already logged in, but let's go ahead and take it from the top here. Okay, great. So here we have our main page of CMDP. It has our compliance monitoring data portal title. We want to check that we are in the correct environment. So it says pre-production. That's exactly where we want to be. It also gives us our latest version. On the other side of the page here, it will show your name. So that's my name up there, and the role that I am logged in as. It also shows my primary organization. So while that is correct, that's my primary organization, it is not where I want to be working today. So what we can do to change that is come back over to this side of the page where it says change working organization. And I will select the drop-down menu. I will just click where I want to go. All right, so now we have a dashboard that has 4 quadrants, and lab admins can see this. So there are my laboratories, change requests that have been submitted to the state, works in progress, and submissions to state. And now I will go over navigation tabs at the top of the page. The PWS Profiles tab. Here you can view all of the water systems for an organization. And while it's loading, you can just view the different search fields that are up top here if you have kind of an idea what you want to be looking for and you don't want to wait for it to load. So as you can see, you can select from any of the water systems for the organization, and you can just select one and see all of the important information. So you have your basic water system profile, water system ID, name, system type, water source type, population, administrative contact and address information. You can also have other contact information if you need to. And the really important and helpful part about this tab is that you can see all of the different facilities, facility IDs, and sampling points associated with a water system. So, for example, right now we have the distribution facility ID selected, and then we can also see the sampling point IDs associated with the facility IDs. But if I were to click on an EP, then I would see the EP sampling point IDs. So that's really useful. Next, we can go to the Laboratory Profiles tab, and lab users will only see their own lab information. You can also search there as well. We will skip the Drinking Water Sample Jobs tab for now because we will be working there shortly. And we'll go to search individual samples. This page allows the user to search for submitted jobs without having to sort through all lab submissions. And now that we have had an overview of the CMDP basics, I'm going to show you how you can upload WQP and lead and copper samples using the CMDP web form. Before I start, are there any questions on anything I just showed?
We just had a question that I just responded to, but I want to confirm with Texas. So someone is asking, what is the best way to assign an admin role for a municipality that has both a lab and a public water system?
I was discussing this with somebody yesterday. My understanding is, and I think Casey mentioned something, was if they're analyzing samples for other PWSs, then they want to be a private lab and not a PWS lab, because the PWS only constrains it only to that one PWS, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And also, I see that I think the state lab administrator doesn't require I think the Chromera part, or I could be wrong on that, but
No, that's right. They don't have to do the 3 steps for submitting.
So I think the long story short is that they want to be, I mean, if they're submitting for more than just their own water system, then it'll be a private lab.
And I would just like to add that so there's the PWS labs, and then there's the private labs and state lab. If you have a lab and you're processing results and submitting them for compliance, then you should register under the private lab and select your lab ID, your accredited lab ID from the list of labs that you registered.
Okay. And there's another question. Will DLQOR be submitted in CMDP?
At this
time, go ahead, James, yeah.
Sorry. At this point, no, we will be working in the future to get that up and running in CMDP, but for now, use your current processes. That is, if you're using E2, continue to use E2, or if you're mailing them, then continue mailing them.
Okay, I think that was all the questions I see. I don't see any raised hands.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Now we'll go on to the Drinking Water Sample Jobs tab. And we can note that...
I'm going to interrupt again. We just got another question. On the list of sites for a public water system, does this match what is visible on Drinking Water Watch, or would the addresses for LCR DS01 sites be visible?
The addresses will not be visible in CMDP, just like they're not visible on Drinking Water Watch. This CMDP will be refreshed on a regular basis. Drinking Water Watch is instantaneous, so there may be up to a 24-hour delay if there's a change made, but CMDP will be reflecting active sample points and water system facilities.
All right, thank you so much for answering that. All right, so we are in the Drinking Water Sample Jobs tab, and we are in the Job Maintenance View tab. So what we will do now in the Drinking Water Sample Jobs grid, you'll go to Create New Job. We will go to enter a group of samples, and we will enter in a title. Or a job description. And this can be anything you like. I like to use a type of sample and a date. So I'm going to say text. Okay. And here we have our blank sample result tab. And we can go to Add Comrades. And here we have our web form. First, I'm going to talk about required fields. There are different types of notations that you'll see in the web form which indicate field requirements. So the red asterisk we see at the top of the page here, that means required. A blue plus sign is conditionally required. A blue F is federally required. And a blue italicized F is federally conditionally required. There are some fields, however, which do not have any notations but are required by Texas to be filled in. These fields are sample location, collector name, sample collector name, and field results for WQP. Now we can start entering our samples. I'm going to start with a WQP sample, and I'm going to begin by entering in my water system ID. So you can either search from the drop-down menu, which will give you a lot of different options, or you can always begin to type it and just make sure that it's filtering properly so you are getting the water system that you want. And once you've selected your ID, the water system name will populate for you and be locked in. For facility, we'll select our distribution system. And our sampling point, we will take the WQP sampling point. Again, our sampling location is required. So we're just going to say kitchen faucet. And we do need to type in our sample ID. We will give it a collection date. And a sample receive date. The laboratory ID and name has already been populated for us, so that is nice. You just always want to make sure that that is correct. And it is right now, so we can keep that. We will also keep the sample type of routine. You can enter sample volume if you'd like, or you could leave that blank. And we do need to enter sample collector name. Okay. So now we have entered in the basic information for the sample, and now we will get into the analytical results. So we move down here to the grid ChemRas results, I'll select add. And you can use the drop-down menu to search if that's what you would like to do, or you can always type in your analyte code. And for this analyte, I'm going to say that we received a value. So here we currently have not detected selected as true, but I am going to deselect that since we are going to have a value. And we can skip standard deviation and go to reporting limit. We do need to enter that. And we can select our method. The nice thing about the web form is that the method codes do sort based on the analyte you have selected. So that is always helpful. I'm going to expand these time fields because it can be a little difficult to read. And that will probably show an error if I left it like that. So that's just nice to show what an error would look like if you entered in a time that did not make sense. Okay, so there's our first analyte. And now we will go ahead and add a few more. And then again, always just make sure that as you're typing, the analyte field is sorting how you expect it to. Again, I'm going to deselect this and say that it is not true, that it is not detected. And for the drop downs, again, you can either view the entire menu or you can type it out and just select tab. Enter in more date information. Okay, and we don't have any errors for that one either. We can keep adding some more analytes.
And Victoria, while you're doing this, I just wanted to remind folks that that sampling location, Texas is going to ask that you put the address in there. So it might not say kitchen faucet. It might be like 123 Main Street or whatever that is.
Oh, sure. Yes, absolutely. And I can do that right now too, just so that we're all on the same page. Thank you for reminding me of that, to avoid further confusion. And again, as you can see here, if you fail to enter in some information that's required, it will force you to enter that. So that is nice that that is true for most fields. So even though we don't have any results, we still need to enter in the reporting limit. There, and now it's gone. All right, and I will just show a couple more. I will show that this has a value. So again, I will unselect this. So it is not true that it is not detected. Yeah, and this is a really good example of how the method codes sort based on analytes. So, we only have this method available for that analyte. So that is always helpful. And we will just enter one more. And we will say, yes, this is true that it is not detected. I know that wording is kind of funny, so that's why I wanted to try and really emphasize how to use that there in the web form. But we do still need the reporting limit. Okay, so there we have several different analytes for the WQP sample result. Now we just need to add our field results and measurements since that is required by TCEQ for WQPs. We'll start with temperature. And because these three first fields are the only ones that are required, if you enter in any information in this grid, that is all that I am going to add. If you want to add further information, I'm sure you can. And I will go ahead and add pH as well. Okay, great. So now I'm going to select Save at the top of the page. And it tells me that the information has saved successfully. So I will close this. And here we see the sample that we just entered. Before moving on, I want to check the Validations tab. If I were to have any outstanding errors that I did not fix, within the web form, they would show here. And I'll show more errors and more examples of that here in our next sample. So I will now go back to sample result. And I'm going to add chem. And here's our web form again. Now I'm going to add a couple of lead and copper samples. So very similar to before, I'm going to start with our water system ID. I'll stop and give it a second to catch up. It gives us our water system name, our facility distribution, and sampling points. And as you can see, we have our LCRs. Our sampling location is required by Texas, even though we don't have any notations there, just as a reminder. And our sample ID. Our collection date. And again, our lab ID and name is pre-populated for us, so we just make sure that that's the correct one we want. Routine sample type, so we'll keep that there. Enter in sample volume if you want to. And we do need to enter in the sample collector name. All right, so we have our basic information in again for lead and copper. So we can go right on to add our analyte results. There we go. And I am going to keep this as true, that there was no detected result. And so I will jump to our reporting limit. And get our method in there. open these up a little bit. Okay, and so there's our lead analyte. Now to add our copper. And I will also keep that as true, that nothing was detected. I will move right on to the reporting limit. And it is giving me an error for our result and analysis completed date, so we'll check on that. Sample received date, 7/22/2024. There is just something that it must not like about that right now. So let's maybe try a different date. Let's try the 23rd. Okay. Thankfully, if you're actually using this in practice, you have actual dates and times that make sense. Okay, great. So there are our lead and copper analytes. And we do not need to add field results for that. So we can just select save. It says that the information was saved successfully. So again, I will select close. And now we have two samples. So we have the WQP sample and the lead and copper sample. Once again, I want to make sure that I am checking invalidations and no errors. Now I will go to sample results and show just one more. And we'll wait for it to load. Since we have seen this a couple of times, I will click through a little faster. LCR2, since the last one I did was 1. And we will, of course, give this a different address. And our sample ID. Give the collection date and time and the sample receipt date. Making sure again that our lab ID and name is the correct one that we expect. Making sure that our sample type is correct, and right now it's routine, so that's correct for what we're doing right now. We can skip over sample volume, and we do need to enter in sample collector name. Okay, and then once more, we finish our basic sample info and we can jump down to the analytes. We'll add our lead to start. We will keep it as not detected. Get into our reporting limit. All right, and one more analyte. And we will also leave this as true, that we did not have any result. Get our copper method. And so I know earlier we saw a couple of errors that showed us a red icon that forced us to fix that before we moved on. There are, however, some fields that do not force you to fix it, which makes the validations tab very, very important to always be checked before you submit any samples or any sample jobs. So to show that, I am going to remove this collection time from the basic sample info. And I'm going to click outside of it. So I removed it, I clicked out of it, and as you can see, I don't have an error alert or anything like that yelling at me. So, you know, maybe I don't know that I need that info, so I'm just going to save it. And it still saves successfully. So when I close this, I have all 3 of my samples, and I am so happy with that, but I definitely need to check the validations tab. And it is a good thing that we did, because we see here that we have an error. So here we have a few different grids that would show the different types of errors. Right now, this is an error that's federally required or conditionally required. So if you have a lot of different samples or analytes to sort through, the sample identifier could help you determine what sample exactly has the error. And the error description. So we're missing data for fields of collection time. Okay, so now that we know, we can go right back to sample results. And we'll go back to that sample because we already know what sample it was for. And we'll just go ahead and enter that time. Now we'll save. It was saved successfully. Now we can close it. Go back to validations. And no more error. So that lets you know that you have fixed that successfully and you are ready to go. Once the sample is checked, we can send it to the reviewer. So now we'll go back to the job maintenance view. And we will select our sample job. I always like to make sure that I check the sample description, the name that we gave it at the beginning. Prepared by name to make sure it was one that I prepared, and the created on date to make sure that I'm submitting the correct sample that I just worked on. So now that we have all that verified, we have it checked, we can send to the reviewer. And we can select from a drop-down. I'll select myself just for the demo purposes. And at this time, you might start to get emails saying that you have submitted a job and things like that. And then the reviewer can select Send to Certifier. And once more, the certifier can select Certify and Submit to State. And so once the job has been reviewed, he or she can electronically sign the job and submit it to the privacy agency. You'll also have to log in. Okay, I like to check the job ID to make sure I'm submitting the correct job. And I also like to note the number of jobs in the submission. So this job ID matches the job ID I selected. And I know that I was only working on one job today, so that makes sense right there where it says one selected jobs. You can also download the XML file for submission here. And here the certifier will answer the challenge question displayed and check the certification statement and then click submit. I won't be doing that today because this field is not masked. So keep that in mind if you are working around other people. The challenge questions are the questions that are established in SCS during registration for a private lab or PWS certifier role. After submission, a confirmation message will be displayed, and you can click OK to just close the window. After that, the job status and the maintenance view will be updated to submitted. As you can see, some jobs say that here. And I will note that even though the sample has been submitted into CMDP, that doesn't necessarily mean the sample went through to CIDWIS, but if that ever is the case, I'm sure Texas will let you know. And now I have finished the web form demonstration of CMDP, and we can go over questions, and then I'll hand it over to Casey to show you how to enter in samples using the Excel template.
And there are a couple of questions. This question might be for Texas. So are the labs going to be using the same analyte codes for WQP and LCR as what you're currently using in EDDS?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. All right. And another part of that question was asking where all of the analyte codes are. So as Victoria was showing you, you can see all of the analyte codes and all of the method codes in the pull down menus in the web form. And once we get to the Excel template, Casey will show you that as well.
I just want to mention, sorry.
No, go
One
ahead.
thing regarding the water quality parameters is we currently are asked by our compliance folks to mention this. The pH and temp are currently reported as field results, and there's a possibility that we will be changing those to sample analyte results in the future. Just wanted to mention that.
Okay. All right. And I don't know the answer to this question, so that's why I haven't typed anything in yet. But if you entered a submission with only the lead result, would it give you an error that the copper result was missing?
No, it doesn't. There's no validation for completeness.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was
And
going to just see
TCEQ
if I could show removing it, but sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say TCEQ would see that on their end and, let you know that there's a missing result. So it would get caught eventually, but not during upload.
Yeah, they call it during compliance with our compliance officers, most likely.
All right. Let's see. When the field data for WQP are now only in the sample table, how would it upload in CMDP?
I'm not sure I understand that question.
Yeah, I don't know if the person who asked that question could clarify what you were asking. And then in the meantime, there's a question on rejection codes. So the lab rejection codes, you cannot enter rejected samples into CMDP.
What was that last question regarding rejected samples or rejection codes? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
It was asking, where would rejection codes be entered on this form? And then another question, how will we enter replacement samples in CMDP?
So rejected samples, Garrett with TCQ, rejected samples and replacements cannot be reported through CMDP because rejected and replacement samples are not for compliance. Routine samples are for compliance. And so we'll be providing guidance on how to move forward with that in the future, as moving into CMDP will be a bit different than EDDs currently.
Questions? I don't see any other questions just yet.
Okay. So thank you, Victoria, for those demos. We are about halfway through the presentation, so I think now might be a good time to take just a quick break before we move on to the Excel demo. If you think of any questions while you're up and stretching your legs or getting water, you can throw those into the chat and we can answer them when we come back. But I will put up a timer and we will see you all back in 5 minutes to talk about the Excel demo. Welcome back, everyone. Let's jump into the Excel template demo. So the first step in using the Excel template is downloading the latest template from CMDP. So I will log in here. Updates to the template are made periodically by EPA with new analytes and methods, so it is important to be using the most recent version. And that doesn't mean you need to download it every time, it just means you need to stay aware of any communications from EPA or TCEQ about downloading the new template. So in CMDP on your homepage, there is this template section over by the working organization and a drop-down menu to select sample results or operational data. So we will select the sample results template and click download. It will download to your downloads folder, so you have to open that. Let me pull it over here. So this is an XLSM file. That just means it's a macro-enabled workbook. So you do have to change some security settings to make sure that those macros will run. If you are having trouble generating an XML file from your Excel spreadsheet, these next instructions are a good place to start troubleshooting. So the first thing is to enable editing in this yellow bar if that is showing up for you, especially after downloading for the first time. And that'll enable you to edit. I'll just close that other yellow bar and zoom in a little here. Make sure you all can see it. So these security settings are in File, Options, and then in Trust Center on this left-hand bar, and you click Trust Center Settings. This trusted location on the left-hand side. And then if your options are grayed out like mine are, you may need to get your IT people involved to be able to add a new location. So once you click this button, you will browse for the folder to where your Excel templates will be saved and click OK. There's also a check mark to trust subfolders, and we recommend doing that as well. So still in Trust Center Settings, there is this macro settings on the left-hand side, and you'll need to make sure that Enable VBA Macros Not Recommended is checkmarked. So even though it's not recommended, it needs to be enabled in order to run. There's also the second option that says Enable Excel 4.0 macros when VBA macros are enabled. You also need to make sure that is checkmarked. And then just OK once you're done changing those settings, and you will be able to edit this Excel file and generate your XML file. So this workbook has a few different tabs. There's the microbial tab, the ChemRads tab, the cryptosporidium tab, and the notes tab. And the notes tab is just updates to the template that EPA has made over the years. It's just for reference and your information. But we will be spending our time today in this ChemRads tab. First thing is this reporting lab ID. It must match exactly what is in CMDP, or you'll get an error when you're trying to upload. Sample ID, you can expand any of these fields if needed to be able to read them a little better. So you enter your sample ID. I will start by entering just a nitrate sample. Sample receive date is today. There's no drop down for water system ID like there is in the web form, so you will need to make sure you have that on hand and type it correctly. Same for facility ID. These need to match what is in CMDP exactly. So that's EP001. And the sampling point ID for that EP sample is TRT-TAP. Sampling location, I'll just say entry point tap. Collection date and collection time. Sample type is a drop-down, so for chems, it'll mostly be routine or confirmation, maybe some special, but routine generally and confirmation rarely. We'll just say this is a routine sample. Volume is not required. These repeat location, original sample ID, those are not required for this. I believe TCEQ wants in this comment field a state sample ID. I'm not quite sure what format, if TCEQ could chime in for what that is.
What was the question? State ID. Sorry.
I believe you're requiring a state sample ID here. Is that something?
Not for. Yes, for just those. Yeah, go ahead, James.
I believe that's for the chem data. I don't believe it's for the WQP or the lead and copper.
Well, this is the chem. So for the sample contract for chem data, DBPs, probably like nitrates, VOCs, SSEs, all of those will have a state sample ID, and if that sample is subject to those requirements, the comment field will have the state sample ID.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. Laura says we're correct.
Okay, I will just enter a value there. Sample collector name is not required by the form, but it is required by TCEQ, so I will enter that in. So this is my first sample information in the sample information column. Next we get to, or section, next is the results section. So there is this drop down field for analyte, and it is limited to only the chemical analytes. So you can either select from that list or start typing. I will say this is a detect, so no, it is not detected. And the result standard deviation is only required for RADs if it is there. Reporting limit is required, and the unit of measurement for that reporting limit. volume assayed is not required, and method is not paired down here by analyte. So you do have to sift through all these methods, unlike in the web form. Do analysis start date and analysis start time. The rest of these are not required. Analyzing lab ID is only required if it is a different lab that analyzes the sample than you as the person reporting it. There is another comment field for results if anything is relevant, but it is not required. And then I don't believe there are any field results or measurements required. So now we can go ahead and enter our second sample. I'll quickly just do another, I'll do an arsenic sample, for example. Keep the information the same. And you can see it is giving you the option to autofill. So I'll go ahead and take that and just tab over. This is another routine sample. And I said this was arsenic, so put in arsenic. And this time I'll say, yes, it was not detected. So now I do not have to enter the result information. I can skip over to the reporting level. And the method. So now that I have these two samples, I could say this is one job and I'm done with it and generate the XML and submit it, or just continue adding to this throughout the day. So next I will add the lead and copper results. We'll use a new PWS ID. This is in the distribution system. And the sampling point ID for that is the LCR 001. And sampling location, the address. Again, that is a routine sample. No comment for the state sample ID. And now I can enter my copper sample. I'll say that is a detect. Enter my reporting limit. And again, there are no field results. Now, in this first sample, since the sample information is already filled in here, I can just continue my second result for that sample onto this next line without refilling in the sample information. So I will jump over here to put my lead result in. And this is not optional. You do have to leave this blank or you will get errors when trying to upload. And you can add as many results as you want to a sample. The next sample we'll start on the next line here. So I'll enter my lead result. So it's asking you if it's not detected, and if that's true, you want to select yes. But if it is, it's hard to explain. I understand that it's hard to understand. If it's not detected, yes, that's true. Or no, that's not true. So you put the sample in. So I'm going to say, yes, this is a non-detect sample. All I have to do is put in the reporting limit.
And while we're here, Casey, while you're typing this in, we have another question.
Okay.
So according to the TCEQ QAP, if the WQP sample is subbed out to another lab, then that analyzing lab has to report it. And this form reads as if they don't have to report it. Has this changed? That might be a question for Texas staff.
Kim, could you read it one more time? Just for.
Yeah, so according to the QAP, I'll see if I can paraphrase, but according to the QAP, if the WQP sample is subbed out to another lab, then that lab who analyzed the sample has to report the data. Has that changed?
So I'll take a stab at that, James. So if the lab that is doing the analyzing does have to report the results, so what that would mean is, on here, lab A sends the samples to lab B. Lab B would then actually report that. The analyzing lab ID field on here is something that's an optional field in CMDP that's provided. This is an EPA product and software, but that's not changing per our QAP.
Yeah, Laura's saying no. And she just said you're correct. So.
Okay, thank you. So now I will enter a second lead and copper sample. So again, I've got two results for this one sample right here. So I'm going to skip that line where that second result is and add my second sample. Same water system as above. And this time, continuing the sampling ID, process LCR002. And again, my lead and copper results. So copper is detected. I'm going to enter a result. With my reporting limit. I'll show you a pop-up. It should, no, that won't work. Some of these fields will pop up with errors. If you enter it incorrectly, like here, it says time should be in an hour, hour, minute, minute format. So you can click retry and re-enter it. But there's no validations for if you mistype your analysis start date to be in the future. There's not quite as many that'll be an error later once you upload. So again, as above, we have same sample, a second result. I will add that on the second line. And yes, this is not detected. And actually, to show another error validation, I'm going to leave off the method here. Again, I'm skipping that line if I want to start a new sample, and here I will enter some water quality parameter analytes. They're not a full sample, but just a few. That's the distribution system, and the sampling point ID is DST WQP. Enter an address. To routine and sample collector name. And now I can start entering my results. I'll start with fluoride. That has a detect. Adding my second result, I'll add an iron result. Again, this was detected. And then let's do one more. Let's do alkalinity. Again, it was detected, so I'll enter a result for that. And let's see. Should make these a little past collection time, maybe. Okay, so the field results section can go at the very first line of the sample. So I will follow that over to the field results part and start entering that here. Again, temperature will be reported this way, at least for now, according to TCQ. Celsius and pH will go on that next line. Again, the rest of these are optional fields. So now that we have our samples, we can say we are done with this for the day. Let's upload it to CMDP. So you'll click this Generate XML button. and it will open up a browser for you to save your document. I'll just save it onto my desktop. It automatically calls it mysamples.xml, so I recommend changing that to something that you know what it is and know what you're uploading. So I'll do my initials and today's date, click save. You can sort of tell when it's done when your browser changes from the little hourglass back to normal, but there's no pop-up or anything that says that it's actually done or that it's generated. You just have to go browse for it. So I will open that up from my desktop and show you what that looks like. So it takes it from that Excel format and puts it into this XML format that is readable by CMDP. You can kind of see some fields that you may understand, but this is not really meant to be read by you. It's possible that you could get your limbs to output into this format instead of the Excel format. So I'll say our XML looks complete to me. Let's go back to CMDP and upload it. So similar to how Victoria created her sample jobs from the files, from the web form, we will also create a new job here and upload the file this time. We'll choose a file to upload, browse for that XML file we just saved, and click open. It will load a little bit and then say done once it's done, and you have to click upload again. And now it'll say information saved successfully and the jobs list refreshed to show your new job. So you can go ahead and close this. And it'll say not applicable right now. The status is validation and progress. If you want to see if it's changed, you can refresh your dash. And now it says 5 total records, 5 were uploaded, and 0 were not uploaded. And now it says it's in the draft status. So we can go ahead and open this. We see our samples, making sure those kind of look similar to what we expect. If you click into them further, it'll look like we had entered them in the web form ourselves, like Victoria did. Takes a while to load. So now our result has appeared. And I can close this. Again, we'll check the validations tab, and now we can see that there is an error in this document. But it is not one of these XML errors. It'll just take you to what needs corrected. You can see it's missing the method right here. Other errors will show down here. It would say with error 1, and you could click on that and it would show the validation error below. But this can just be corrected right in the web form for this example. So now I can just add this web form here, this method here. Sorry about my password manager, and save it. If an error can't be corrected in the web form, you will need to delete the sample job, fix it in your Excel file, and regenerate that XML file for upload. But at this point, I would do the same thing to submit it to the state as Victoria did, send to reviewer, send to certify, certify, and submit to state. I do also want to mention that there is a section for you to add an attachment to this. You can choose a file to upload, such as a chain of custody, but it's not required, and I don't know how often Texas will be actually checking that. So. Are there any questions at this time before I move on to other ways of submitting?
I think I've answered them in writing, but we did have a question. Like, this was the training for chems and stuff like that. But if you open up the Excel template again, Casey, I just wanted to point out that there's tabs on the bottom. So if you have microbial data, you can submit that on the microbials tab. And then when you scroll over to the right, all of the field results are right there. That's where you would enter your field results for total coliform. And then there is a notes page at the back. So that's where EPA is going to tell you what has changed, but there aren't really notifications per se that come out from EPA saying that the template has changed. So you need to just check that periodically before you submit results. I don't know if anyone has any other questions. I don't see any more, and I don't think I see any hands raised.
Okay, thank you, Kim. So as I mentioned earlier, there is a third way to submit, which involves direct LIMS output to Excel or LIMS to XML. So you could make your LIMS, put it in this Excel format, and then you generate the XML file as we did before. Or like the XML file I showed, you can generate that directly. So that takes more work initially to set up, and you may want to discuss that with your LIMS and IT people to see if that's something they can make happen. GEC, we would also be happy to provide assistance. So feel free to reach out to us or TCEQ if you'd like to set up an individual meeting about that. Now let me pull up the CMDP Help Center. So this is EPA's help desk website. A lot of material on this website is really meant for primacy agencies, but there is helpful documentation for lab users as well. You will want to focus on this compliance monitoring data portal module. This launch CMDP button takes you right to CMDP. Say you only have the help desk link and not the CMDP link. This will take you to CMDP where you can sign in. Password reset has some information if you're like completely locked out of SCS and you aren't able to change your password in there. There's some information on how to reset your password. Go back. FAQ is a link to all the CMDP help desk or help center articles. There's a lot of information for all types of users. So I would recommend sticking to this lab water system info button. That really filters it down for laboratories and water systems. So you can see there's a user manual, some videos, a user registration, just documents developed by EPA over the years. But let me go into one and show. So the user manual, there will either be like a link here to in this notes section for it or an attachment that you can download. As I mentioned earlier about the direct submission, there's this LIMS button, and this has information in that LIMS to CMDP submission process. So it has more technical documentation. These three documents, these top three ones, will be the most useful, especially the XML schema definitions and the inventory and lab data dictionary. So that'll help with mapping. TCEQ also has their own webpage with helpful CMDP information. It'll usually come here to the top of the page, and you can see this new compliance monitoring data portal section. If you click it, it'll take you down to that section. So here you can find links to that CMDP Help Center website that I just showed you to. It's this CMDP support button. This first one is just an informational EPA page about CMDP. There's some registration guidance that kind of explains the roles of SES in more detail, that stuff that Victoria went through in the beginning. And it's also just a really good step-by-step registration guide. There's the demo sessions that we're in today, and then there will be more documents coming soon, so keep an eye out for those. And then there's also Texas General Inbox for any CMDP questions. So let me just throw the PowerPoint back up. And the path to production, in addition to your 3 microbial submissions, if that's applicable to you, if you also analyze micro, you must submit 3 error-free submissions for each analyte group you're certified for. These can just be typical batch uploads for your lab and include both non-detects and detects, and just make sure you're showing that you understand how to submit, and that you understand that you're submitting, how to correct any errors. Let's see. Once you submit those 3 error-free submissions, then you could sign up for an account in production, and that would be your graduation. So you're welcome to practice as much as you like, but for graduation purposes, you must show that you're comfortable submitting multiple scenarios. And then understand that what you submit is not for compliance at this time. This is just test, so it doesn't take place of your current reporting requirements. Are there any questions before we move on?
So we have a question on when this will start. So I think the answer to that is as long as you can get registered into SCS test and get into CMDP pre-production, you can start practicing right away. And if you need help, you can let us know, and we'll be happy to help you along the way. As far as if there's a deadline for getting into production, like you have to be in by a certain time, I will have Texas talk about that if there is a requirement.
Yeah, I'll take care of that, James. So for CMDP and we don't have a deadline at this time. So we're just now, getting into production, reaching out and getting labs on board to do testing, and then be registering in production and begin submissions there. As Kim with GC said, the samples you submit in test are not for compliance, but once you have kind of finished your 3 error-free submissions and can move on to production, you would be able to effectively submit samples in production and no longer submit samples via existing methods such as EDDs. Or if you're doing microbial, I know that we currently have somebody on here for microbial, the E2 submissions. So we will eventually have some sort of a deadline where the existing methods will be no longer accepted, but we just have not formally decided on that date at this time, and want to, first get an idea of the, how the onboarding and, getting labs into production and test before we set a deadline.
That's the only other question that I see.
Okay,